Hi, Shobita, and welcome to the Unmasked podcast.
Thank you. That's a very interesting name you've got there, Unmasked.
Yes, yes, it is. It is. And are you curious to know why I'm calling it Unmasked?
Yeah, of course.
Well, the reason I call it unmasked is it all started with the whole pandemic, and we were wearing these physical masks. And now that most countries have
Mm.
started taking it off, the question that I have in my mind is, are we really taking off only the physical mask and we keep all the other masks still on there? Is the question I have. So this podcast is kind of an experiment for me to actually get that mask off and have some real conversations and real actually see the person beyond the mask, see the person underneath that mask, that raw, vulnerable, fun, the real person, and make
Yeah,
that connection. And
absolutely.
so unmasked came up, so I said, okay, let's go with it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So, welcome. And first, where I'd like to start is to go a bit into your childhood and background, and start from there. What kind of a person were you? Where did you grow up? Where did you do your schooling? And things like that. Because I know you for the last couple of years, and I know you for who you are right now. And I'm very curious where this being started.
Yeah, so my childhood was in Uti in the pristine mountains, and uh, I used to be known for my dance then in Uti, and most of the town knew me because I would be performing every weekend somewhere or the other. In fact, some of my classmates remember that I wouldn't participate in sports too much because I'm scared of injuring myself just before the program. So, like, I'm not going to run. I'm not going to sit
Right.
on the swing. I'm not going to do this. So, that's their memories of me. So, I think I grew up very fearful in that sense because um, there's already a bit of fame, so-called fame in a small town, but you already are known for something, and the kind of fear that brings along with it. So I think I was very averse to any sports for a long time. Now I can relate to why that happened because when I heard this conversation, I was like, oh, this is what triggered that. But I never understood it for a long time as to why I had that fear. But yeah, so anyways, coming back to the dance and the pristine environment, we had this most beautiful school which had this hexagonal glass classroom
Mm-hmm.
which overlooked the mountains. And we had this beautiful walkway with these trees which had the most colorful flowers. And every day we would walk, they would just keep falling, like imagine purple and pink and white flowers just falling on you. And you had to walk down this 500-meter pathway to get to the classroom, which is this beautiful glass building overlooking the mountains. And the most beautiful setting a child could ever wish for. And when we'd go to the playground, we would pass through these little magical small undergrowths, which only a child can literally crawl through, which adults can't go through. And it almost feels like, and I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton at that time. So it was literally like you just expect a elf to pop out or a mom to come out and have a conversation with you. So it's quite a magical childhood. And then life happened. So my father got a transfer to Bombay, and horror of horrors, we moved to Dombivli.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly I see all these tall buildings, crowded buildings, people crawling all over the place, and dirty gutters overflowing in the neighborhoods. And it was just like a horror show of sorts. And and it I think that kind of changed my personality quite a bit then because um, suddenly I was a nobody from being very popular, being recognized to becoming a nobody in a city which was not very appealing to my senses.
Mm-hmm.
It
Wow.
was quite a contrast. And I don't think adults realize what these transitions mean to children, because for them it's a very practical, matter of fact thing, right? You move from one place to another place. But from a child's perspective, it's a completely different world. Everything changes
Wow.
when you kind of move, leaving all your friends behind, knowing the only world you knew, to
Yeah.
a place where you have to make a lot of adjustments, you have to make a lot of compromises. And one of the toughest things was we had to leave my nanny behind. Um, she was a Christian, and we used to go to church with her every Sunday. We used to go to the temple with my parents every Thursday. And it, she took care of us because my mom was working.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we had to leave her behind. And later we got to know that she lost her mental balance after we left. And uh, she was completely she passed away after a few years. But that, I think, affected my brother and me quite a bit, because it was like leaving a family member behind and moving on. So
Yes.
these are things, I think, that kind of led me to understand how the mind, how the personality, everything starts shifting when the environment changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think children don't have that kind of ability to comprehend it or make sense of what's happening. All they know is something's different, but they're not sure what or why or how. And as parents, sometimes we don't necessarily have the right conversations with them, because maybe we don't even know what are the questions to ask, right? Because you
Yes.
don't know what's going on in a child's mind. So during the pandemic, especially, I think we had a lot of those conversations during the pandemic, you might remember. But what I realized is a lot of these problematic areas for adults had started
Mm-hmm.
surfacing
Yep.
when they had so much time with themselves. All the things they'd not dealt with, all the things they'd not faced were coming up. And I think that was one crucial reason we started the conversations, because I think these conversations are so important.
Mm.
Otherwise, when we meet people, it's just about what did you eat, what did you drink, where did you party, and uh, but you don't really. There's still a bit of loneliness that remains for most people, because you could be in the midst of a big crowd, but you're really not able to talk about what's affecting you, what's matters to you, what's bothering you, and you're not getting the right perspective. So I think uh, that understanding, that as a child these things affected me. In
Mm.
fact, when I was in school, I had decided to become a child psychiatrist, because I really just wanted to help children understand these issues and figure it out.
Mm.
And but I didn't know enough about the field, so I thought I had to learn psychology. So I thought I had to do arts. I didn't realize you have to do medical science to become a psychiatrist. So, and then I decided to take home science, because it had psychology also as a subject, and it also taught a lot of other things. Instead of just doing a boring dry degree, I thought, let me learn so many other skill sets that the home science degree offers. So I come from a typical South Indian Brahmin family, in which academics is of utmost importance, right? I mean, you have to get
Yeah.
high grades, you have to be an accomplished dancer, you have to be a good singer, and blah blah blah. You have to have your accomplishments. And here I was wanting to join a home science course, and you can imagine, like, my family is filled with doctors and lawyers and CAs and engineers, and my dad is a gold medalist from IIT, and here I'm wanting to do home science. So it was a bit of a shock for my family, because he had the marks. But yeah, I was just so stubborn that I went on a hunger fast at home till they agreed to at least find out about the course, because they were not being unreasonable. All they were telling me is 2 years you do science, and then
Mm.
you can please join that course. No one stops you, but at
Right.
least do 2 years to science, and then you make up your mind. But I was like, I'm not going to waste a science student's seat when I know what I want. And, I was just being ridiculously stubborn. But finally, like, after the hunger fast and all, they realize, okay, this girl is not going to. So they kind of went and found out about the course, and they really liked what they heard, and they allowed for me to join the course. But I ended up with a master's in textiles instead of psychology.
Okay, that's it again, a contrast.
A degree in textiles. Because as I studied psychology for 4 5 years, I found it somehow inadequate. It was not answering the questions that I was inherently facing. That
Mm.
uh, it didn't seem to. It seemed to be putting people more into boxes than taking them out of boxes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
To start saying, okay, this is a type A personality, this is a type B personality, this person had this kind of a dream, so this is what it's going to mean, or this. It was just like generalizing, and then
Mm.
it was just not answering all the questions for me. So I said, okay, this is not working out. So I took textiles.
Okay.
Which did turn out well in the long run. But yeah, but I think life has its plans for you. You make plans, but life has its own plans for you. And sometimes when you just go with life, it takes you an adventure. So
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Wow. I love that. I love that. And after you did textile, the course, Masters in Textile, then what did you do? Where did
So
you?
I did my BSc textiles,
Huh?
and then I got a campus job. I got placed even before I like graduated completely. I got placed into Raymond's as part of their marketing division of the Park Avenue brand. So we
Okay.
used to design the men's trousers and suits and do the marketing campaigns and things like that. So it was very interesting, but again, I found myself craving for the lunch break
Mm.
and the weekends.
Okay.
So I knew something was off, and also uh, having the home science degree, kind of, I think, in my own mind, made me feel that people were looking at me as I was a dumb idiot who couldn't get into anything else. So I took up home science. It was
Mm.
my own perception, but so I wanted to counter that. So I did an MBA just to show that I have some brains. Yeah. But yeah, the MBA course was nowhere close to the home science course. So anyway, that's a separate story. And then I joined another corporate job thinking maybe it'll be better after an MBA. But then I realized corporate is corporate. So I quit to become an entrepreneur because I
Okay.
wanted to do everything and not just like parts of things. And I wanted to like provide employment. That time, you're in this uh, young blood kind of thing, saying you want to do something and I want to give employment to people. And so I became an entrepreneur. And that was a fun journey, but it was still not completing something. Um, so then I sold off my business and I moved to a village where we built a community. We bought barren land. We took our kids off school, moved to barren land, and built a small village. My husband and the kids and the villagers and me. And yeah, that's been like for 10 years. And then my kids had to join school, so I had to move back to a city. So now I've taken up and very very interesting assignment where I work with artisans across the country, and we're trying to empower them to become entrepreneurs and to like uh, provide an avenue for them. So yeah, this is very exciting work. So that's where I am at.
That is so interesting. Wow, Shobita. And as you were talking, you started off talking about contrasts. And I kind of began to notice that you talked about Uti to Dombivli, and then you talked about home sciences to textile. It's like a life of contrast from corporate to entrepreneurship. So it's really about riding the roller coaster and having that adventure.
Yeah,
How did,
absolutely.
so my question is then, when you have so many contrasts as you look back at your life, how did you deal with these contrasts, or when you talk about it, what is it that you went through, felt, and the reasons you did what you did?
So I think as a child, I became very clear that my whole purpose was to be happy.
Mm.
So even when I joined my first job and they asked me, what's your goal in life? I said to be happy, and not the kind of shallow happiness that comes by doing something or experiencing something, but a deep rooted happiness which is unshakable.
Mm.
A kind of contentment, a kind of state of bliss and peace or calm, which is kind of unshakable, which becomes something deep within me kept saying that that's how life should be. This
Mm.
something's wrong with the way things are. This is not how it's meant to be. So, but then I would find myself getting angry. I would find myself getting upset, and I'm like, okay, why is this happening? And no matter how much I try to control it, it seemed to get worse. Like the more I
Mm.
say I shouldn't get angry, I shouldn't get angry, and then again I'm like getting angry, and I just couldn't find the answers to that. So, but throughout I was searching for it externally, right? So I was like, I kept thinking, okay, now if I move from here, from this town to this town, then it's going to change. Or if I move my jobs, it's going to change. If I study more, it's going to change. If I have a new set of friends, it's going to change. If I do this kind of dance, it's going to change. If I go on a trek, it's going to change. Or if I eat in this kind of restaurant, it's going to change. Or if I travel in a limo and go abroad and, scale mountains. But, no matter what you're doing, there's still something that doesn't seem to be complete. So I was chasing um, that bit which seemed to be missing. So I think that's what my whole life is about. So to people, it might seem like random, just completely like whimsical and impulsive and random. But for me, it is like that deep voice within, which just tells you at that moment, this is what you have to do it right now. And then you don't debate it, you don't question it, you just go with it.
Mm.
And to the rest of the world, it doesn't make sense. But to you, it's very, very clear. There's absolute clarity that, yeah, this is what you have to do in this moment. And there's no doubts there. So,
Right. And I noticed that you're listening to that inner voice that I think most of us kind of suppress or ignore, and it's about really listening to that voice. And what I've noticed for me is that it maybe at childhood it was very loud and all of that, and it would come out as a rebellious nature where you also voice it that way. And then somewhere you realize the reactions that you get are not what you're expecting, and then you say, oh, you know what, maybe that's wrong, and you kind of one kind of begins to suppress that voice, and that becomes smaller and smaller and smaller until and in some cases you just quieten it, becomes quiet
yeah.
altogether. And what I'm hearing from you is that you're giving what you're listening to that voice and keeping that going.
I had suppressed it, in fact, because
Mm.
I so often I would hear the sentence, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Right. And you start feeling that something's wrong with you, that everybody else has it sorted, everybody else knows things better than you, everybody else is, comfortable with their lives. But that's not so. And you keep thinking something's wrong with you. And it's only during these kind of conversations you realize everyone is going through that same angst, right? And it was so I had kind of become a complete doormat at some point, because I kept thinking the problem was with me and not with uh, something else. So I became a complete doormat. And then when there was this trip I went on, and I was just walking in the mountains alone for almost 10 days. It was a cycling trip between Manali and Ladakh, but the cycle got punctured and I ended up walking most of it alone. And there was like this a vehicle that would be parked like kilometers away, and I would walk up to it. And so I was literally trekking in the middle of nowhere with not a human being in sight for almost like 10 days. I just meet them when I meet them, but lonely stretches and the most beautiful nature surrounding you. And at that moment, it became completely clear to me that no, I don't want to live my life blaming someone else for a second grade quality of life, right? My mistakes will be my own, but I will make my own mistakes. I'm not going to make someone else's mistakes. So, and there are no mistakes. It's just what you choose to do at that point of time. So it became absolutely clear, as clear, and that voice just came back all, excited and happy that we are back. So from that point on, there's been no looking back.
And that's when you gave voice to that, listen to that voice.
Again.
Yeah. Again. Okay. Wow. So then I'm going to go back to what you said again initially about before you would have listened to that voice. You mentioned in growing up in the small town and being like whatever the popular one in a small town, when you know something like dance is something that I know you love and you've pursued for a long time. So being known to going into a city like a big city like Dombivli and being completely unknown. So talk about how did you feel when you were known growing up in that small town, and then when you went there and nobody knew you. Whereas I'm assuming that in a small town like Uti, when you walk around, everybody knows, oh, Shobi, oh, she dances, or everybody knows that. Do this. So talk to me about this and that.
So when I was in Uti, it was like, my nanny would do everything for me, right from buckling my shoes to feeding me to, taking care moment to moment. There was a popularity. There was, I just took it for granted that I'm going to be called for everything, that I am going to be on stage. I am going to be the one making the speeches. I am going to be, XYZ. And I think the best thing that happened was moving to a city like Bombay, where my accent was laughed at. I was called a Madrasi, and I was completely unknown. Even when I joined a dance class, I had to unlearn everything that I had learned in my previous class, because the techniques were completely different, and so I had to like literally start as a beginner. So it was like you lose all your identity, and you realize that identity is something that's acquired and it's not you. You are beyond all these identities you carry. I think that was the deepest lesson, though I could not articulate it as such at that age. But I think throughout, every time when I changed tracks, that's what I was doing. I was shedding one identity and taking another identity. So it's like living multiple lives in one life, because you're doing completely different things. And that helped me understand really how all the identities that we carry are just constructs.
Yeah.
And who we are is way beyond any of these identities. Right. So, and that led me to philosophy, to start understanding what all these people were talking about, and about coming out of these constructs. But we get so identified with who we are as a mother or as a daughter, or as with the work we do, or with the books we read, or with the environment we live in, or the country we belong to. We just become so, or with the gender also, we get so identified with any of these things. But there is something beyond all this that still seems to be around no matter what's changing. So yeah, breaking off all these constructs really leads you to liberation, is what I concluded eventually.
So what were the identities that you were carrying, and how did you shed them? Because I'm very curious on this part.
So I think one of the identities that was strong was being a woman or a girl. Like when I was in Uti, I realized, and it's very particular about looking pretty. And when I moved to Bombay, and I started realizing that people on the streets take advantage of a girl walking, and you get molested and you start feeling unsafe. And I think at some point I just stopped dressing up completely. I just wanted to look dowdy and unpresentable. And that part stayed with me quite a bit, because I didn't want to draw any attention to myself. I just wanted to become invisible. and be ignored on the streets, right? So um, I think somewhere that identity of being a girl versus, my brother who is a boy and he gets away with certain things which I can't get away with. I think that played a big role for a long time and was, I think, the root of my rebelliousness, because the whole sense of injustice as, a child, especially, I just moved to Bombay when I was transitioning into being a teen. So it was like the worst phase in that sense, where all the physical bodily changes plus the environmental changes plus the changes of culture, where men don't respect you but they're like treating you as an object. So having to deal with all those in multiple levels, I think that was to let go of that identity that I am a woman and I need to be careful, I need to be I need to keep myself safe. I think letting go of that made a huge difference, because at some point I read uh, an article, I think, which said that why do we take things like rape and all like so seriously? I mean, if you had a bad accident, you would just move on, right? But then we pay so much importance saying, oh, don't go out, you'll get raped, you'll get molested. Why not just treat it as another body part and something happened and just move on? And I think that freed me, because till then I was carrying a lot of the mental trauma of the abuse that happened. And during a conversation with some of my dance classmates, I realized almost every girl had had the same issue at some point of time or the other. So this is just so common for uh, girls to be abused, when you're walking down the street, or by some family friend or someone or the other, right? And to be touched inappropriately, and we carry a lot of that shame and that guilt and feelings of being unclean somehow. I would have the sense of wanting to just scrub myself clean off it, but it never leaves you. But I think reading that article and just thinking of, you know, the vagina and the breast is just another body part, like your eyes or your nose or anything else, and not pay so much importance to the fact that it is something that someone else doesn't have, the other gender doesn't have, and just forget about it. I think that was very, very freeing for me, letting go of that whole identity that you are a woman. And I traveled alone and I started doing things that I would have been otherwise scared to do. And the moment I let go of that identity, I realized how the way people treat me changed.
Okay.
Because I think something changes in the way you present yourself, so people don't cross certain boundaries immediately.
Yeah.
So something shifts there.
Wow. That's absolutely brilliant. I think you're right. Every woman, every girl goes through some bit of this, and we don't even talk about it. And that's what I realized growing up. I was like, oh my God, why is this happening to me? Why only me? Why is there something wrong with me? And this conversation never happens until I started reading and realizing, oh, I'm not alone. Actually, it's everybody. It's just kept under covers. What's your opinion on having this conversation and for the younger generation and for everybody actually? What are your thoughts on why do you think two things? Why do you think it is kept undercover, and what can we do if you think it needs to be more conversations need to happen?
See, I think it happens from two perspectives. One from the perspective of the perpetrator, and one from the perspective of the victim. Because even the perpetrator is a victim of sorts, right? Because either they have been abused as children, or if they are children, they are also curious. If it's an older child, there is a certain level of curiosity, because you've heard things, you're so there is this thought that maybe there's some excitement, maybe something's going to happen, and you just want to explore. There's that aspect. And I think even, when I just look at it, sometimes when I'm really angry and I'm not able to control my anger, and it's an outburst, and then I just relate to it. Yeah, like anger is for me, maybe a sexual urge is for someone else. maybe they're not able to control it. Maybe it is way beyond their ability to do something about it, because no one wants to inflict pain on another on purpose. This is one thing I've realized. No single human being deliberately does these things, because the moment we do something that inflicts pain on others, we immediately feel the pain ourselves, right? You're never comfortable. Like if you shout at someone, you immediately feel the pain of it yourself,
Yeah.
even though you have inflicted violence on someone else. So, um, so the moment I started realizing that, I realized that, oh my God, so those poor men, it just became a shift to a very compassionate understanding of their inability to handle themselves, right? And uh, for the victims, just to know that there are others like you, and you don't have to hold on to that incident. It is just a memory. It's a memory that in time has gone. All you are doing is repeating it in your head and amplifying it and creating trauma around it. So if we learn how to like let go of it, to, I'm not saying ignore it or suppress it, but to learn to deal with it. And again, I'm not saying that the perpetrators should get away scot-free or whatever, but the moment there are open conversations, that itself becomes a hindrance, because people will realize, oh, this might get talked about, so I don't want to do this, right? So it just makes it easier for everybody, because they know that they could be named and it could come out, and it's not such a secret anymore. It's not a hush hush topic that people are going to be scared of talking. So I think it helps everybody. So I think there should be more conversations, really. And recently there was a person who shared about he was abused as a child by a relative. And he came and shared with a bunch of close people who are really close to him, because the counselor had recommended that he talk about it. And our kids were there, and but it was so useful for them, because now the way they will look at other children, or the way it immediately they understand the impact of abuse on someone, right? So I think growing up, if they had a choice, they would less likely make the choice of abusing someone, because they know the kind of impact it has on how traumatic it was, how long the person suffered as a result of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important that we have these conversations in our families, we have these conversations in our friend circles, and normalize these conversations.
Absolutely. I think normalizing the conversation is the most important, because right now these things are taboo topics. So because I think there's a discomfort around it for generations together. And that, so then when that comes up, it's like, okay, let's kind of, people fidget, people move, people ignore, and then it just kind of, it's like, treat it as it does, that word did not come through at all. And with that kind of behavior coming from the adults, obviously then you create that atmosphere for the younger generation as well. So they're like, oh, maybe this is wrong, and then that just goes on and on and on. So yeah, I think having more conversations about this is very, very important. And also I think it's about, when you're talking about a woman, there is, you mentioned this earlier as well, it's like you have to be a certain way. It is kind of, even I think if it's not there in the family, it comes in through the community, the culture, the school where you live. It kind of comes in like that. So that I think creates a kind of, the have to be creates an identity automatically as well, which is which how do you think that this have to be identity can be shed?
Yeah, see, without realizing it, I mean, there's so many times I tell my daughter, don't do this, or don't be like this, don't go out here. Are you? And she'd be like, you don't ask that to my brother. And we don't realize it, but subconsciously, we start absorbing the same patterns, and we start doing the same things, right? It takes a lot of awareness, it takes a lot of conscious breaking out of it. And that has to keep happening at an individual level. That bringing in that awareness, what am I doing, what's my fear here, addressing that fear, and making your peace with the eventuality that may occur. you know.
Yeah.
I think those are the things that are important, you know. And then
Yeah.
having a so what attitude. So what if something happens, right?
Yeah. So what? Yeah. Convert it into a so what?
So what? I mean, so what? Eventually, we're all going to die, right? So, and we can't escape that. I think somewhere when we make a peace with that fact that we will die, then a lot of these other so what's become easier to deal with.
Mm. Uh, when you said this, I recall that this is one of the things that you mentioned many, a couple of years ago when we were doing the life book
Yeah.
sessions, and this is something that you mentioned, and it just struck me, it made me quiet and really think about it, because I never thought about it in that way. When you say that eventually we're all going to die, so you just need to make peace with it, and we all know it's inherently somewhere. We just don't kind of say it in the way that you say it. uh, so two questions here. So how do you, in the life book, when we're talking about in that conversation, the reason that struck me was we were talking about expanding life and looking at it from different dimensions. And then at one point when you say that at the end of all of this is death.
Mm.
So what are we dealing with here? Is there a point doing all of this? So how did you deal with that when you expand that with this perspective?
So I'll give you two stories. There's this one guy, Hercules or Atlas or one of them, I forget who. They are cursed, so they have to roll this heavy rock or the earth or whatever up this mountain. And the moment they reach the top, it rolls back down, right? And then again, so it kind of denotes a cyclic nature of existence, right? You're doing the same things over and over and over again. Now you can either trudge with it as if it's a big burden, or you can think of it as a game and play with it,
Hmm.
right? So you anyways have to push that rock up the mountain and it's going to slide back down. But if you treat it as a game instead of a burden, suddenly the whole thing becomes a lot more fun and so many more days of fun. That's one way of looking at it. And the other, uh, I love the Buddhist approach to this. You know, they deeply talk about impermanence, how everything is impermanent.
Mhm.
And if you see the sand mandalas that the Buddhists practice, so they have these very intricate sand mandalas they make, and they take years to learn it. There's a certain symbology to it. There's certain icons that they use. There's a certain technique, and it takes years to master it. And so when they make these huge mandalas, it takes days, like 10, 13 days or 30 days or whatever it is, and intricate designs. And each thing is so beautifully done. And the moment it is complete, they just destroy it. So one may ask, what is the purpose of making it? Because they're not putting their signature, they're not selling it, they're not putting it up on a wall and saying, I made this. It's completely anonymous, right? No one, you can't claim your part in that whole mandala because there are a number of them sitting in the circle and doing it. But the whole point is, you are a part of a whole. You are an insignificant part of something much bigger. But what you do still has significance in that small bit that you do. And no matter if it's permanent or impermanent, the joy is in doing it beautifully. Right? It's like a meal. You cook it, you eat it, and it's gone. It is impermanent. So you can just do anyways, I'm going to eat it, it's going to be done. Or you can make a beautiful meal, right? And you can enjoy the whole process of chopping the vegetables and paying your complete attention to it, stirring it just right, you know, roasting things perfectly. So you can make it a beautiful experience in itself without thinking, what is the whole point? Now I'm going to eat it. Now it's going to get digested. All this is going to remain as shit out of this. And, you know,
So
why
what's
would I
the
bother?
point?
Why bother? Only shit remains. So you can either have that attitude, or you can just enjoy the experience of it, knowing that, yeah, it is going to be shit, but it doesn't matter. You just enjoy now. You enjoy this moment, this present, beautiful moment that's emerging with its own unique possibilities, bringing a beautiful aliveness to your life. It just brings a sense of joy and aliveness. And just to know that you're alive and this whole universe is there for you to enjoy, and the sky is up there for you to watch, and the flowers are out there blooming right now as we speak in millions of colors. And what a beautiful, wonderful world. Why not just enjoy it and relish it?
Absolutely. That's an absolutely beautiful analogy that you brought with cooking and turning it into shit. I'm like, oh, okay. So how do you employ that perspective in your daily life today?
So I used to be someone who used to be so impatient, so much about the result, right? Like, I would just want to fast forward everything and move and finish something. It was more about finishing things for me. So I didn't care how I did it. It was just about finishing, and impatience and urgency. And, in fact, one of my colleagues used to call me Kedlaya Express, because he'd say you'd be running around like a train all over the office, like the busiest person. And I was always busy. I never had time for anything. I'm busy. I don't have time.
Mm.
And then the whole thing just shifted to like just doing what you're doing at that point. And I still haven't mastered that art yet. I still don't do things as beautifully as I could, but I'm slowly learning the joy of doing it. So I just try to slow down and pay complete attention to what I'm doing at that point.
Oh, wow. All right. Just cut 1 minute. I'm just going to, my camera has an issue. 1 minute. What I really loved about all the things that you're saying is about being present in that moment and the joy of doing. And I think a lot of us lose that in what I relate to you completely when you said it's about you just want to finish things. So your focus is always at the end. Is how do I reach the end? And when you reach the end, it's like, okay, now there's another thing that comes up, and then again you're trying to reach the end. You're constantly trying to reach the end of that, whether it's driving, like really driving to a destination, or doing doesn't matter what, even the cooking, you're just wanting to reach the end of putting that in your mouth and getting to the next one, which could be bedtime or whatever else you want to go. And yeah, it's about just bringing that perspective of let me enjoy this right now.
Yeah. I was recently invited to this place, and they asked me to talk about quality. And I was telling people there that if you can just be completely present to what you're doing at that moment, that brings joy, and that is quality. That's all it is, right? Even if you're aware that the quality is not good, you are aware, and then the next time you do it, you are bringing in a little more of yourself and trying to get the quality right. So that's all it takes, just being present. And so I was there's this other person with me, and I was saying, yeah, you can only do one thing at a time. And she says, but sometimes we multitask on the phone. And it's like, yeah. And then we were both at the railway station, and I was on a call, and then I realized that I'm not going to see her again. So, and in that call, I knew which parts I don't need to pay attention to. So I just started speaking to her, and the train was coming then. And then very sweetly, passive aggressively, she was a lady who was talking about non-violence throughout, but absolutely passive aggressive. She says, I just love the way you're able to manage your call and talk to me and, way to get onto the train. And I just smiled and I said, yeah, I agree. But so the moment we talk about these things, people are just waiting to point out to you that you're not doing this now. But what we need to realize is that everyone is everyone is trying to practice that, right? Just because now I tell you, Bindhu, it's so much joy to be absolutely present. And if you, instead of taking that, you're waiting to see, acha, Shobitha is now not doing this, let me just jump on her. Yeah. That's where we get lost in. We forget the message that people are trying to give us, and we're just lost in trying to find fault with them. So
correct. Yeah. Uh, and that brings me to the topic of judgment, because there's a lot of judgment that automatically comes to people, and when you're talking about being present, and when you talk about these things, the immediate thing that you get back again is that, you're right. It's a lot of judgment thrown your way.
But,
Oh.
actually, see, what I realize is there's so much judgment within us, right? We're constantly judging things. And to even become aware that, yeah, I'm judging, and to realize that um, even if the other person is judging, it's just a reflection of my own judgment, right? Somewhere they're just reflecting what I would be doing. For me to even pay attention to the fact that this person has judged me is a judgment of sorts, right? We can't completely, unless you're completely out of that zone, you won't even recognize it in the other person. If you don't have that element in yourself at all, you won't even recognize it in the other person. It's only because we carry these elements in ourselves, we see it in the others, and they're all just mirrors showing us that, see, you judge, stop doing that.
See. So do you think there's anything called non-judgment?
I think it's only when you're absolutely in that state yourself, about your own self and about everything around you. And it happens in moments, right? Like there'll be so many qualities you don't realize you have it as a quality also. Somebody may suddenly say you have this quality, and then you suddenly are like, oh, is that so? But you have never paid cognizance to it because it's so naturally you. So if my whole goal is to get to the stage of not judging, so much so that I don't even recognize that that quality exists. So
Lovely. Now tell me, how has dance, being a dancer, helped you bring these perspectives in your life, in just your journey?
see, I think everything is a path. Every single thing that we do is actually a path to finding that space, of completing ourselves, or coming home to our own self and realizing that we are not any of these things, but we are that larger. Uh, the truth of us is a non-dualistic oneness, right? But to get there, any of these paths take you there. And dance is such a beautiful, beautiful path. In fact, I don't know, the snake and ladder, it has its origin in an ancient Indian game.
Yeah.
And
I forget
in
the
the
name.
Tamil, yeah, in the Tamil thing, if you see the top boxes just before, so it's supposed to be the path to enlightenment, right? So ego, anger, and all bring you down. Your good deeds take you up. So it's actually the artist's journey to enlightenment or moksha.
Mm-hmm.
The top three boxes closest to enlightenment is your song and dance. And so these arts are just meant to do that, because what it does is, if you look at the lyrics, there's so much of lyrics about union, which is like um, the Christian mysticism or Sufism or the Bhakti movement, where you're talking about uniting with the ultimate, right? So it's shown as the lifting of the veil and the union, the final union. But it is all about moksha, or your salvation or your liberation. And so the lyrics are indicative of that. You bring so much awareness to every body part, and the shlokas kind of tell you that where your focus is going, your mind is going there. So keep your mind steadily on your hand, and on this and on your leg. And so what you're doing is you're training your mind to become still and aware, and to stay where you want to. And everything, and each mudra has a specific benefit to you. Every step is like asana, or like a certain posture, and brings its own benefits. So I think dance is so codified so beautifully. But unfortunately, you see that art also can become such an ego trip, and you we see it, as artists ourselves. It so easily becomes an ego trip that, oh, I've done a great performance and I got praise today. But that's not the purpose,
True,
ultimate
true.
purpose at least.
Yeah, yeah. And being a dancer myself, when you're talking about being present and the joy of doing, I relate to doing dance when I'm dancing. That moment, whatever role I'm playing at that moment, is who I am, and that's it. Like there's nothing else that actually matters.
Right.
Yes, if it is a stage or whatever, all okay, that's all the peripheral stuff. But as a dancer, that's the place. It's dancing
Right.
in that moment, and I think
Right.
that's like demonstrating the experience of being in the moment and the joy of doing, like the one that you were talking about.
And in fact, there is this Vajrayana traditions where deity practice is done to show you how identity is a construct. So you can take on the identity of the deity and you become the deity in that moment, which shows that you can take on any kind of identity you choose. So you literally can be who you want to be. You're not born with a
Yeah.
personality, you're not a personality. You can mold your personality to be what you want, and that personality can stay relevant to that moment. And when that moment passes, you don't need to stick on to that personality. You can take the next personality. So you can be the CEO of a company. There you can, ask people to do something for you. And then you can go and you can become the maid servant and wash the dishes. So you don't have to carry the other personality into an area where it doesn't belong. And that's what I think causes the angst and the suffering, right? We forget that these identities are very contextual and you're supposed to leave it like, if I'm playing Hanuman on stage and, I'm supposed to leave that Hanuman on stage and not go around jumping like a monkey on the road. So when we forget that, that's where the problems come. So you hear of people walking into cafes and saying, don't you know who I am?
Yeah, that's a great, great place to see it. Leave your identity, like leave it there on stage and move on.
On, so, and also the other thing with dance is because there's so much of emotion involved, we can cry on cue. We can uh, so it's actually a beautiful way of releasing all our emotions,
Yeah.
right? Because the emotions arise and pass, but as dancers we familiarize ourselves with the emotions and we learn to allow it to emerge and to allow it to pass. So if you can just extend it to the other emotional aspects of your life and use it as a tool to deal with trauma, it
Hmm.
can just be amazing. You learn that, okay, allow it to arise, intensify it, now allow it to pass. It's gone. That moment is gone. That
Hmm.
story, that episode is gone.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. So, how has dance influenced you as a person and your personality over the years?
I think dance prevented me from getting into a lot of mischief because there was no time. There's no time for boys. There was no time for fooling around. There's no time for parties. We had all the time in rehearsals and uh, you know being performing. So in that sense, you learn to let go of a lot of the non-important things very early in life and to focus on what needs to be done. Also, it gives a lot of confidence, right? Because when you go on stage, you dance in front of, you can go anywhere, you can speak. It gives a lot of confidence at many, many levels. And I think also the body being active, the last 3 years I haven't exercised and I know the difference now. I can understand what it means to be a person who's not physically very, very active in terms of exercise or dance or sports, right? Because it's
Mm.
such an alien concept to me. Because right from my childhood, I've either been dancing or doing some sport or the other. So I have not experienced this side. But it's good to know what it means. But I think it's very important to have that
Yeah.
ingrained.
And I think something like dance stays in your body. It's there in your muscle. It's there in your mind. It's just there. Um, so yeah, you can pick on it, and I think like looking at you, you can say that there is that dancer in you, and that's if you remember, that's how we first connected.
Yeah, yeah.
The first conversation was just about that, and though dance was the doorway, like it was the sign on the
Right.
door that we opened that, and then we walked in, that opened up a lot. So I also feel that dance brings in connections, because
Absolutely.
it's a vocabulary. It's not a vocabulary, but it's just something that you kind of immediately create a rapport with people. It creates deep bonds, much beyond just the rigor of dancing, right?
Absolutely. The rhythm never leaves you, right? So
Never.
I recently went to a conference where there was a folk artist, and he was singing these traditional songs, and everybody was standing around and listening. And I just had to dance. So I went and started dancing, and he started dancing with me. And we danced so much in sync. And then he told me, he says, हमारे यहाँ मानते हैं कि um, जिसमें ये रिदम होता है उसका नेचर से बहुत कनेक्ट होता है कि so someone who is very rhythmic, they're really connected to nature. So and apparently in their community they have a lot of respect for people who can dance to rhythm. So they're treated special. So I think it's good.
It's good at many levels.
Yes, for us.
So
It's a good
any
ego
yeah,
trip.
absolutely. That's the ego trip, true. Any moments in dance that you remember very vividly?
Oh Lord, I created so many blunders on stage. Okay, so I mean, I'm known in my dance class for my blunders. So they're always dreading before each program as to what is she going to do today. So there's this, I had this uh, role of this Rakshasa. So I had this mask on and I couldn't see clearly because the holes were not in the exact place for my eyes. So I could like literally like look like this. And there was this ramp behind. So I couldn't see it clearly. So when I danced and I went behind, I tripped on the ramp and I fell. So now I had to make it look like a step. So I just made it look like I sat down on purpose on the ramp and I started doing some step there, sitting down. Yeah, so a lot of stuff like that. And my best friends are from my dance class. My dance teacher is like my I love her so much. And it's a beautiful family and we have so many memories. It's like endless, like the some of the best memories are from the performances. And there are those moments, right, where you forget yourself and you're just lost in the dance. And uh, it's uh, undescribable, some of these moments, but yeah,
Yeah,
they're
you don't need words because I totally relate to what you're saying. So some of my best friends are dancers, and like I like with dance brought us together, but there's so much more than dance that we share. But it's like a deep rooted foundation, and I don't think words even describe the whole relationship.
yeah. I mean, those kind of friendships I think are so rare because there's something beyond which is connecting you, right? Beyond the normal meetups.
Yes,
We are united by a common purpose in that moment.
yes.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's totally rare and beautiful. Yeah, I'm so grateful for those kind of friendships.
There's this one dance program. The last moment, 2 minutes before the dance starts, my teacher tells me, "You want to do this item," and I don't know the item at all. So I just stand behind all of them and I'm just copying them through the item.
Okay, how was
And
that for you?
oh, you just fap your way through, right? So you just look like you know what you're doing. And that so applies to life, right? Often you just like pretend like you know exactly what you're doing, but you don't know, you have no clue what you're doing. And all you're doing is fapping your way through it.
I I always do it, and this is the first time I'm relating it to life. This is a great comparison, and I'm sure when my dance friends listen to this part of the conversation, they say, "Bindhu, this is just for you," because that's what sometimes I do on stage, and in my circle, they keep making fun of me for that. Like, oh, Bindhu has to be behind somebody because if she's in front, then how will she copy?
And sometimes you have to make up the steps on the spot because you've forgotten the original steps, and you just have to choreograph something on the spot and do it. And you know, but when you look confident, no one knows that you're doing something else there. Only your teacher knows, and she's like, okay, good girl.
And just like life, right? You appear confident, and nobody really knows that inside you, you're trying to just make up and then figure it all out at that moment.
Absolutely. And that's so true of most of like really famous people also. It's, you know, they may appear confident and they may, but if you have conversations with them, you realize how much of anxiety and, you know, stress each one of them is going through before each presentation or before each program or performance.
Yeah, yeah. True. That's lovely. And another part of you is you being an author. And I would love to hear that journey of from where you started, what made you an author, what are the steps that you followed, and where you are right now.
So the poems just happen, you know, it would just like, it would just come and I would just write. And, you know, so it's not very poetic. I mean, if you go by like a typical, is it like the best poetry? No, it's not. But it was just an expression of something that I was going through at that point. So like 80 poems just came like in a matter of like 5 6 days. It would just like just keep coming on their own. That showed me that sometimes you can't explain why something happens a particular way. It just is that way. And actually, long back, I had a dream where an entire children's book was very, very clear in my dream. The storyline, the cover, everything was there. And then the story of the seed, this ruby thing that kept growing in my head. But throughout, I would just write a little, but absolute lack of confidence because I don't have the skills. I'm not a good storyteller. And I would show it to someone and they would like dismiss. And I'd eagerly wait, you know, what are they going to say? Are they going to say it's good? You know, is, but you don't think yourself that it's good enough, right? So, and I would keep parking it. And then again, somehow the story just wouldn't let me be. It just needed me to complete it. So at some point, I wanted it out of my head. So I published the book, I printed it, I printed 1,000 copies, and I said, I'm done. I sold, and I realized that if you keep marketing it, you can sell. It's not a big deal. All you have to do is keep talking about it and people will buy. But I was not happy with the product. I was still not at peace even after doing all that. The story was just still there. And then I sat and I redid it completely with an editor. And she's amazing. She's a darling. So Chitra is my editor, and I'm really, really grateful for the time and effort she's put in. You might know Chitra from Arohi.
Yes. We connected
Yeah.
that way. No, yeah.
So she is a gem. So, but after I redid the whole book, got the illustrations done, the PDF is ready now. Now I'm happy with it, and I have no push to even send it to anyone or do anything about it now. It's just a sense of completion. Like for me, it's complete now. I don't care if anyone reads it, they don't read it. Now it doesn't matter to me. You know, till then I kept thinking it is that the book should reach this, it should do that, it should, nothing, that's all disappeared. For me, I think it was more about getting it right and getting it finished to my satisfaction. So I think it was more an internal journey in that sense. But now whoever I'm sharing the PDF, if they finish reading it, they're quite happy with it. So let's see what happens. I'm not thinking about it now. But I have another 5 books that need editing. But I'm just waiting to settle in my new assignment, my new job. And then maybe at some point I'll be churning out books by the dozen.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And I'd love to read your the new version of the The book.
Ruby,
Ruby,
yeah.
yeah, I would love, because it all started, my introduction to Ruby was through the kids in at Arohi, where they were talking about the Ruby and Raja and the worm and the sails. And I'm like, what is this? And then I realized you were behind that whole the concept, which is
Yeah.
quite fascinating. And then of course we did
Yeah.
work together on that as well. So I'd love to look at the latest version of it.
Sure, sure. Yeah,
Because
so with Arohi, the reason we did that workshop, I mean, I had a lot of dreams for Ruby, so it's all on, it's stalled now. At some point later in my life, I'm definitely going to take it up again. But that whole idea was that a seed becomes a tree. In between, anything can happen, and there's no right or wrong that happens in between. And I wanted every child to have that understanding that their story, as they imagine it, their own unique story, is fine. There's nothing right or wrong about it. It is just their story. So we did in Arohi one version of the story where they said the Will should be called Raja, and then they came up with their own version, and it was such a cute story. And it's amazing what all came out of that. They did a drama, then they came up with some game, and there's one girl who took it to some government schools, and she took it across. So that way, I think that story has so much potential. Another group I did it with came up with some candy floss tree and magical tree with a portal to the alien world, and so the same story can have so many millions of interpretations or paths.
yeah, no, that particular story has a lot of potential, and I really want to see that story and that book in whatever version it is to reach a lot more people, lot more, not only children actually, because that's a very relatable story even for adults, because we all face it in some way or the other.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, someone they gave up all their
Do you want to give a brief summary of what this book is all about? Because you've said so many characters. We have said Ruby, Raja, Seed. But what is? Just give us a summary. Do not reveal anything else.
Yeah. So, so this book is about a seed which has a dream, but the dream appears too beyond its capacity because it doesn't have hands or legs or the ability to go around and search for this tree. And it talks about all the struggles the seed goes through and its eventual realizations and the realizations through the journey. And in fact, one of my friends who's given up his job and gone and bought some land and trying to do something there, he says every time I get overwhelmed by the enormity of the task ahead of me, I go and read the book. It's become my Bible now. And it gives me the courage to move on. And I thought that was just so beautiful. I just feel it's worth it, even if one person has benefited from the book. I think it's been worth the effort of writing it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That the new version needs to go out to more people. Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure out how slowly.
Yes. Yes. So that's one part of you, and you just mentioned about the fact that yeah, the whole journey, right, from the seed. So tell me about that, from the seed to the tree. How did this book, how was this seed in your life? Where was it? How did this, what's the origin of the story?
So the dream for me, like the actual dream of the book, was the seed for me. It was like the seed who had this dream. And again, it was like, I can't write. I'm not a writer. I'm not this. I'm not that, right? So here, again, the identity of not being a writer was something I was carrying.
Hmm.
But you can be anything you want to be. All it takes is you have to keep working at it. You have to learn the skills that you need to. You have to like figure it out along the way. And so breaking through that limited identity of who you are not and becoming that. So in fact, I created an email ID which said author Shobitha, which sounded so fraudish because we have this imposter syndrome, right? Like you don't want to call yourself an author. You don't want to call yourself something because you feel like an imposter as you do that. But the important thing is to break out of that also and to claim it. to say it. At whatever level, I may not go around claiming all the while, but at that point, it was important for me to break out of that limitation that I'd imposed on myself. So that for me was a journey of, and the finishing of the book was finding the tree for me, like, just completing it to a satisfactory level, uh, and the learnings that came out of it for myself.
That's nice. And what is it? What are the daily things that you did or did or did not do to break out of the imposter syndrome of, yes, I'm not a writer, to being able to publish that book?
So when I first wrote it, and then it was on my laptop for almost like 7 years. I didn't even touch it. And someone once asked me, "What's your dream?" And I said, "I don't have any dream. I just help people dream." And then by chance, we ended up talking about this story, and this guy goes, he's like, "Are you blind?" He's like, "I think you should read your own book." This is what he told me. He said, I think you should read your own book. And that's when I realized this book is for me. It's not from me. This book is for me, telling me that don't set these limits on yourself. Don't worry about the how of things. Just dream, and everything that's happening in your life is taking you there. So you don't worry about it. You're not making it happen. It's all happening. You just have to stop interfering and allow it to. So
So
yeah,
that's what you would tell the budding writers who have a dream, or people who have a dream to.
absolutely. Just let it happen. And um, it, discipline is a wonderful thing if you can get around to it. I still haven't been able to master that myself. But for example, there was a point of time when I joined this group which would write at a particular time. Uh, and in 15 days, I had a 25,000 page first draft ready of the Bhutan book. So that shows how much is possible, right? So if I had that kind of discipline, by now I could have easily published 10 or 15 books, which is why I said I know that there will be a time I'll be churning out books by the dozen, because with awareness, slowly I'm getting to the point of that discipline, because we have so much time. I waste, I think, easily 80% of the time in the day, or at least 70%. And yet there's so much that's happening. So imagine if one could just move towards, using the time well. It's just incredible what we're capable of doing.
Yeah. I it's very interesting that you're talking about we waste 70% of the time. Not many people would say that, Shobi. Where do you think we waste our time? Let's talk about it, because people don't talk about it. It's all about I don't waste time, right?
Um, the first thing is procrastination. You have to do something, but you keep moving it to a little later. So now one thing I'm learning to do is the moment I think of it, I try to finish it right then, instead of saying I'll do this later. So uh, sometimes I spend time on my phone, uh, and there are times I end up watching movies, but I look at movies. I never used to watch movies. It's quite surprising. Most of my life, I have never watched movies. I would sleep through movies. And when I started writing the books, I started watching movies more as a homework, because I wanted to see how the characters being developed, and how do people write, how are dialogues happening. So my kids would be like, "Are you watching movies? Like, sit you watching movies?" And now it's become so much of a habit that I end up watching very regularly. But I know, right? So I'm not sure whether it's a complete waste of time, because I know that there is that in my subconscious that lessons are going on, though I'm not actively like trying to understand the process. That's how it works. Like, you just keep watching or reading, and then subconsciously you're getting the gist of how things are being developed. So yeah, some time goes there. The other time goes in not being organized. Like, a lot of time goes because I'm looking for things.
Yeah.
because I have not taken the time out to become organized. And my finder on my laptop is not organized. My kitchen is not organized. My cupboard is not very organized. Uh, so that's one battle I'm fighting right now, trying to be a little disciplined about these things. But maybe in 1 year we should catch up and see where I am at.
Okay, we definitely do that then. But you moved from a city to a village. That would have been a journey where you would have to let go of a lot of things and identities, and that would have been a very different transition. Talk to me about that transition. One is what led to it, and second is how did you go through that transition, not only you but also your family.
Yeah, so I think for the kids it was relatively easier because they're very young. So for them it was just more space, mama, more space. So they were like very happy with the space that they found. Physical space, like, open land, able to run around. And I think for a child that's so important. We don't realize how much they miss that in a city. And for me, till then, I had been accumulating all these beautiful artifacts, like, paintings or, good furniture and decor things and books. And, I had accumulated so much. And I was also studying Buddhism at that point of time. And I understood deeply gratitude and interdependence and interconnectedness of everything. But I wanted a more practice of it, not just like theoretical, but to really understand it and to understand a simplistic life, life which without the frills. So when I started getting rid of stuff because I had to move, uh, our house was not ready. Luckily for me, our house, which was supposed to be ready, was not ready. So I had a lot of stuff and I didn't know what to do with it. So I had to get rid of it. So as I kept getting rid of it, I realized how little you need to live by. And eventually, when I moved to the barren land, it was just some clothes and some utensils. That's all. And my books got destroyed. Like almost everything that I had got destroyed. So it was a big lesson in detachment for me, especially with the books.
Mm.
And a lot of, beautifully done bed sheets and things that you really hold dear. But life doesn't look at it from that sense of value. To life, everything is the same, right? Like you look at a dog doesn't look at a banknote as being different from a piece of paper, or an organic hand woven bed sheet as being different from a piece of rag, right? So when you look at life, life doesn't bring these judgments. It's all very human constructs that we have. And to let go of all that, and to let go of my own identity as being an entrepreneur, as being an MBA, and realizing that I had zero skills, I was useless on barren land. There was nothing that I could contribute. And to come to terms with the insignificance of my existence on large tracts of land which don't care whether you are there or you're not there. I think that was a beautiful lesson in really understanding what life means. So I'm just so grateful for all that, though it was painful and it was a struggle, especially letting go of power. When you have 10 people who are listening to you and you can order them around, that's a different kind of kick.
Yeah.
And the de-addiction is painful.
So how did you manage the de-addiction?
By washing vessels, sitting and washing and paying attention to the washing.
And getting joy in the doing of that activity.
Joy. Yeah. So everything that I had earlier dismissed off as mundane,
Mm.
because I always thought that my time was more valuable and I shouldn't spend it on washing and cooking. And, it's something that someone else could do. And my time should be used valuably,
Yeah.
to let go of those notions and to do all those so called mundane tasks with complete attention and to realize how much joy it can bring
Mm.
and to not look upon it as menial. I think that was a big lesson for me.
Wow. Wow. And as a family unit? you said the kids were happy because they were younger. But
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
family unit, to transition from a city to the comforts of a city to the comforts of a village, but it's a different kind of comfort.
Yeah, I think by the time for me, I had already worked on my desire list quite a bit. So I was like quite out of that mode. The kids would dream of pizza. So, when they had to make drawings, they would sometimes draw pizzas falling down from the skies as rain. So, but we would bring them to Bangalore often enough so they don't feel deprived. And but they started realizing when they were younger, not anymore. When they were younger, they started realizing that eating pizza would give them a headache because they had got used to like the homemade food for long periods, right? So the moment they would eat something that was not so good for their system, they would feel the difference in their body. But slowly they learned to ignore those signs from their body and to enjoy the pizza. So they adapted.
Oh,
So we
got
taught
it.
them conscious eating, So we said, okay, chew completely, close your eyes, chew it completely till you can't eat it anymore. So they had a list of things now that they wanted to eat with their eyes wide open and fast.
That's it. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And was that the time that you also moved them into the whole unschooling path, the alternate way? Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what was the motivation to do that?
I hated school. So we just foist our own dreams upon the kids, right? And actually, we realized my son is academically very, very strongly inclined. So he started fearing failure because he was just so good at academics in school and he was used to all the praise. So I was just reminded of my own childhood where,
Mm.
you grow up with a certain amount of uh, personality and that can become a detriment. And my daughter had a very different way of learning. She was more artistically inclined
Mm.
and she learns slow and she learns deep, but the school the school treats everybody with one lens, right? So what we realized is we wanted very customizable program that could fit each of them as per their own interests and inclinations. So that was the whole experiment, and I think it went off quite well. They are self-motivated now. They create their own schedule. They decide their own goals. They know what they want and what they don't want. They have a lot of clarity. Of course, they did miss having friends and they did miss having the discipline of a school and things like that. There are pros and cons to everything, right? So you'll never get it perfect anywhere.
Yeah.
But I think it turned out okay overall.
Overall. And what was the way you managed learning at that point of time?
Feeling guilty that we're not spending any time teaching them.
Okay, let's
And
start
then,
there.
yeah, like we must do something. We must do something. We've taken them out of school. Now we're not spending any time. We're not teaching them. We're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And time just kept flying by because we were so busy with our stuff. And somewhere we realized the kids have learned. We don't know how, but they've learned.
Got it, got it, got it.
So it just happened. I mean, so my daughter gave her 10th NIOS. She joined a school in between to try it out. Then she realized she didn't enjoy it. Uh, my son would keep saying no one teaches, but he managed to finish his IGCSE curriculum in like 4 5 months, and he was getting good marks in his mocks. So yeah, I think they coped quite okay.
Got it.
So,
Got it. And your opinion about the current learning system and any thoughts on that, the conventional versus what's needed for now?
I think everything has its own role because we also passed through a conventional system and we turned out okay. So I think this too much of angst against anything again is not a great thing, but there's definitely a lot of scope. If you don't take a current educational system too seriously, it's okay. But if you take it too seriously, if people are worried about the marks and it's not meant to really serve the needs of every child. It doesn't take into account the uniqueness of every individual. I just wish it did that, because uh, kids wouldn't grow up thinking there's something wrong with them then,
Mhm.
because they're being compared on parameters where they shouldn't be compared. And the sense of constant comparison and competition leaves us feeling so inadequate to face life. And we stop really understanding how each of us can fit the whole, and how we can blend and use each other's skills and strengths to really help each other out, to cooperate, to create beautiful bonds of friendship and joyous relationships instead of comparing and competing. I just wish that correction could be made in any system.
Any system,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I can't agree with you more. Super. Now tell me about your just Shobita today, your daily schedule. What are the things that you fill it with? What comes your way? Just how do you spend a day? A day in Shobi's life, if I'm your shadow.
oh, there's no typical day.
Okay.
but I've started doing a bit of yoga now.
Mhm.
I just joined a gym like last week. So whenever I'm in town, I try and go to the gym and do some workout, uh, because there's no farm work here. So I'm in Bangalore now. I'm traveling quite a bit now. I'm going to different clusters, meeting weavers, meeting artisans, and then there's discussions with the team on how we can really uh, create a brand identity, what's the kind of direction we should take. Then there's mails to be sent out, and sometimes a bit of cooking. Today I started with a nice yummy smoothie of banana, dates, coconut, and some nuts and raisins, and a bit of cocoa powder. So enjoyed my breakfast. Yesterday I had some relatives over, so made some aloo parathas. So it depends. Sometimes there's washing to do, sometimes there's mails to be sent out, calls, and uh, uh, I also do these sessions called Journey into Yourself. So just taking a break from that.
Mhm.
Otherwise, that begins at 5:30 in the morning. So it's a bunch of people, and we all have a sharing that happens. Sometimes they reach out, and we have conversations. Um,
Okay.
just
That's just you flow with the days. What I'm
Yeah, absolutely.
tell me more about the journey, the cohort journey that you were talking about, the journey to the self.
So it has three modules. The first module is awareness, where we kind of bring a lot of awareness to the identities we carry, what that means to us, what are the labels we carry, what are the patterns that we have, what triggers us, what fears we have, what desires. So it's a complete list of everything about us. We kind of break apart our own selves, and there are certain tools to deal with our emotions, and we practice that, and we come back and we share what did we experiment with, what difference did it make,
Mhm.
what is the kind of beliefs we carry, what is the kind of reality we construct in our own heads, and what does actual reality look like when we stop using the stories of our head. So this is the first module. The second module is connection, which is about gratitude, about wonder, about relationships, about deep listening, about conversations. And so that's the second module. And the third module is visioning, which is
Mhm.
what do you want to do and how can you create the life of your choice. So,
Okay.
yeah,
And you've taken a dream. You've taken a break right now.
break right now. Yeah.
Okay. And what's your dream
So there's a
then?
lot of traveling. Mhm.
Are you there? In all that you've said, Shobi, one thing that I've noticed that you probably have not told us about is your love for adventure and sports and things like that. And I also know that you were into or are into martial arts. So tell me about that part of yourself.
Yeah, so I was into martial arts in my college, a bit of it. And I think that was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, one of the best things that I ever got into. It gave me so much confidence because, all these guys who were molesting me on the roads suddenly started getting it from me after that. Not that I was stronger or better trained or anything, but it was just a sense of no one can mess with me, and literally there was a time when I chased four guys down the road and caught one of them and slapped them. So it just gave this immense sense of confidence that I can do anything that I wish. And also, it really pushes you beyond your limits. And there were days when I'd literally like crawl out of bed because everything would hurt. I couldn't laugh, I couldn't sit, I couldn't get up. And then you have to, in that state of pain, you go and again you have to go through another set of rigorous exercises. We'd be doing like 100 sit-ups and push-ups and all kinds of crazy stuff. And again, the bonding there was incredible with the people who were part of the group. And but what it teaches you is when you think you're done, there's still more that you can do. And it's and learning to um, bypass that pain, learning to transcend that pain and still carry on. I think that teaches you how to face life in many levels. It teaches you to not pay too much importance to anything that you so call go through as suffering, because that'll also pass, and the pain ends at some point. So I think these are very subtle lessons that martial arts bring. I recently tried joining Tai Chi and I enjoyed the 3 4 sessions I went to, but I'm traveling so much that it's becoming difficult to be regular. So the gym is a little more flexible because I can go whenever I wish. So that's why I joined a gym. The yoga is nice, but I wanted something a little more uh, challenging.
Okay.
So
All right. And what's your dream?
if I say I don't have a dream, now you're going to be.
What is it? Well, okay, let me rephrase. What is it that you look forward to?
I look forward to a day when everybody feels a sense of, especially women. Again, I'm using a narrow identity here, but my dream would be really for every woman to find liberation, to break free of any limitations they've set on themselves and to really fly. Because I think women, in some sense, have a greater say over things. So if they are sorted, I think a lot of things will get sorted. So that's my dream. Yeah. I
And
also I have this dream of creating this sisterhood where women can just share with each other. They can depend on each other. They can rely on each other and be there for each other. So some kind of a network.
Mhm. All
So
right. Okay, that's lovely. And what's the latest book that you're reading?
I'm reading the Gita by Patnaik, but
Mm-hmm.
I, I am not too happy with the interpretation, honestly.
Okay.
So I think I'm shutting it after a few pages.
Okay. And a book that you would recommend?
Hmm. Difficult to pick one book.
Okay, I'll give
Uh,
you two or three or a couple.
See, all the books that I really benefited from are very philosophical. So
Mm-hmm.
I do. Shanti Deva is one. There's a way of the Bodhisattva. I mean, that's one book that I really love. Dashtavakra Gita is another text that I really enjoy reading and understanding. Then there are books on dependent arising and things like that, but they're very technical. So, but these are the books that really actually I enjoy going through. So,
And what about movies?
I think Dalai Lama books.
Okay, Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama book, there's this book called Joy of Living. There's something about, isn't that the book?
I don't remember the titles. I just usually remember the content stays with me, and then I forget what the book is called. So I just usually scan through books nowadays. So
Okay.
Pick up what I want.
And then scan through them. All right, lovely. And what about movies?
Movies. I'm so bad at this. But yesterday I watched this movie, Swimmers. So I think it was a very sweet movie about the Syrian refugee, them crossing across and pursuing their dreams. So I think movies that even Halle Berry's uh, Bruised or Bruising or something like that. No, forget. Don't know.
You're
Don't ask me
forgetting.
what.
So you let go of the names of the movies and the names of the books, and you keep the memories with you.
The movies usually I don't remember. After I've seen them, I don't remember them at all. So
That's lovely. And what advice would you give to the people listening? Youngsters, adults, children, whoever.
don't listen to any advice from anyone.
Okay. That's number
No,
one.
just kidding. Okay, wait. What advice would I give? I think pay attention to every advice that anyone gives you. Examine it to see whether it stands true for you in your context. And if it's going to make your life better and more beautiful, follow it. If it's not, discard it. But don't go by who is saying it and whether they're doing it, where they come from. Just take the advice at that moment. And anything could be giving you a lesson, which is very, very important to you. Even a small child could be saying something that's so, so important. But if you know how to listen, you might find so many cues around. So just pay attention to every conversation that's coming your way, is what I would say.
Lovely. And one thing that you did say subtly throughout is to listen to your inner voice.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's lovely. And any thoughts, any feedback for me from what you've seen of me, what you know of me?
I am just so glad to see you doing this podcast, Bindhu, because I think this really brings out a lot of you. And I think this is going to be a big contribution from you to a number of people. I think this is going to be very, very powerful. And I was waiting for you to break through and come up with something incredible, and you've done it. And I'm just so happy, and I'm there in any way that you need me to be. So I'm just looking. I think fast forward this to a couple of years down the line, and I think you've got something major up here. So I'm just waiting to see what this is going to evolve into, and I'm sure it's going to be something great.
Thank you very much, Shobi. And this is one of the things that you had mentioned, and I told you this when we met after so many years of knowing each other. You said, there's something stopping you, Bindu, break out of it. And that stuck. So thank you for that, for bringing that in, and that thought, just that seed, planting that seed in me.
Yeah.
All right, lovely. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you so much. All the best.